Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. My video's gone AWOL again. There's some setup change. That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it. Right, what have we got for you today on Elevenses? Well, we have quite a lot of news today. Motorbike rider in Phuket killed a rival taxi bike driver. He was out on bail. He'd already shot two others dead. A dead man gets taken for a final bike ride in Ecuador, which is one of the weirdest stories I've ever heard. London is apparently now one of the, well, not just one of the world's most congested city. It is the most congested city, according to one study. MAGA meeting the Minister for Transport Decarbonisation. I didn't know there was one, but hey ho, we learn something every day. And we'll have a quick look at the Aprilia Tuareg 660, which offers a lightweight dual sport performance bike. We'll look too at the rise of Royal Enfield and Super Soco. And today's talking point, which will feed into from the previous story, is what's wrong with bike design when we need a winter riding kit to fit to a motorcycle. So all that and more. Hopefully some people will join us live before we get to the end of the show. Settle yourselves down for the next 30 odd minutes with me, Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. You are watching Elevenses, which goes out live every Wednesday and Sunday at 11 for some 30 odd minutes of topical news, controversial views, and better biking tips. Right, okay, so before we crack on with the news, I'll just bring you up to date with my gift vouchers. They are now available to purchase online. They are available via my coffee page, which I'll just pop the link up to you there. Now, how these work, it's very simple. You buy one of three different values of gift voucher. They range from £35 to £80, and you can either use them yourself or give them as a gift appropriately, as Christmas is coming up. And you can redeem them against the cost of a course next year or even an online coaching session. The big plus is that they offer you a discount on next year's training. So if you purchase the £80 voucher, for example, it's actually worth £100 when you use it against the training course for next year. So buy two, you'd be saving £40 on a training course. So that is a fairly significant saving. There's the vouchers. And as I say, those are available from the coffee page, which is up on the comment stream. Pop over there, have a read, have a look, and see what suits you. And do yourself a favor and save some money. Right, okay, so on with the news. James has looked in. Good morning, James. Good to see you. So what have we got for you today? Well, the first story is a slightly bizarre one. A man released on bail after shooting dead two rival motorbike taxi drivers at a Phuket bus terminal in Thailand in January has shot dead a third rider. The incident happened late on Saturday night, and the victim, a guy called Chapam Wanchen, was shot dead whilst sitting in a white plastic chair in the parking area for motorcycle taxis. The shooter, Vian Adchutong, aged 60, apparently arrived with his son and confronted Mr. Chomper. Only a few words were apparently spoken before Vian pulled out a gun and shot him twice. It turns out they'd been released on bail in April after shooting dead two other men at the main bus terminal north of Phuket town in January, and he'd been released on bail to prepare his defence, which sounds a bit odd, but there we go. In the January incident, he allegedly told police he'd had a serious argument with the two men. Well, seems slightly extreme to shoot them. Carrying on with the dead rider theme, this is probably the weirdest and the most ghoulish story I have ever heard. Some you probably know that some motorcyclists choose to make their final journey in a motorcycle and sidecar hearse. But a group of motorcyclists in Ecuador took things a step further. They took what was claimed to be the body of their dead friend for a ride after removing his corpse from the coffin and propping it up against the rider's back. Apparently, according to the reports, Eric Sedano was shot dead last weekend on the way to a funeral, and his parents' permission was obtained to take him on his final ride. And of course, this being the social media age, the stunt was, of course, filmed and put up online. The police have called it an aberrant and unhealthy activity, but apparently not investigating since there have been no complaints. Personally, having watched I didn't watch the video, I just read the story and looked at a couple of still clips. I couldn't bring myself to watch the video. I'm actually wondering if the stunt was actually staged for social media. There is no further stories on that, but it has appeared online all over the world, and my guess is it may well have been a stunt. Right, okay, don't forget, if you have comments, you have questions, you have anything to say, I'm more than welcome to receive those. I always like to hear what you have to think about the show. I will try to get back to you if I can while I'm on air. If I can't, I'll certainly get back to you at the end of the show. So do drop me a line if there's anything you want to comment on. So, where around the world has bad traffic jams? Well, funnily enough, I had to drive into Euston this morning, drop the other half off for an X-ray on her knee replacement, and believe it or not, the traffic at 7:30 this morning was actually pretty light. It didn't take more than 30 minutes to get in, and only took me just over 20 to get out again, which is not actually bad for the journey. It can take 45 minutes or more. But if a new traffic study is to be believed, London has shot from 16th worst to first place overall in the ignoble worst jams charts. The study comes from traffic information supplier INRIX, and they say, look, based on their movement of vehicles calculations, the average driver will lose 148 hours stuck in jams across the capital in 2021. And the reason for this, well, they claim it's down to the widespread construction of cycle lanes across London during the pandemic. Now, predictably, a cycling charity immediately stepped to the two-wheelers' defence by saying it was incredibly simplistic to blame new cycle lanes for causing congestion. Even though I would say that a pro-cycling lobbyist should be able to see that with the traffic flows back to where they are pre-pandemic, they're just 1% down apparently on where they were before the pandemic struck. If you start taking away significant amounts of road space from cars and trucks and buses, then the narrower roads will struggle to cope with the demand. INRIX Operations Director Peter Lees said that the installation of cycle lanes had had a negative impact on congestion. He said use of the roads is all about supply and demand. If demand goes up but road space is shared with other forms of transport, there's less tarmac effectively for the cars to be on, and that then has an impact on the speeds on the road and therefore causes congestion. But Duncan Dollymore, head of campaigns at the charity Cycling UK, disputed those claims and pointed out that cycles can use road space more efficiently. Well, that's a matter of opinion. It's a matter of location. Cars can obviously carry 4 people in the space that only a couple of cycles can fit in. Same problem with motorcycles, actually. And when cars are traveling freely, they will cover that ground a lot more quickly than those cyclists too. And I do find it rather hard to believe his claim. He says on Blackfriars Bridge, cycle lanes take up 20% of the road space, but move 70% of people across it at peak times. Okay, possibly, I suppose, if traffic is absolutely stationary. But think how many people sit on a bus compared with on a bicycle. So there's a lot of back and forth of propaganda going on here. Another pro-cycling correspondent responded that only 1% of London's roads have cycle lanes. So that's almost certainly true, but the fact is that most of London's roads are also quiet residential streets, and they're not the busy through routes, and that is where cycle lanes have been installed for the obvious benefit of cyclists, keep them separate from the main traffic flows. So where they've been widened or installed on particularly busy roads, yes, they will have an impact out of proportion. Anyway, which other cities are busy? Well, according to INRIX, Paris was in second place on the global rankings, 140 hours lost in 2021 per driver. Brussels, 134 hours lost. Moscow, 108. New York, 102. Back here at home, Cambridge is the second most congested city in the UK, followed by Bristol, Exeter, and rather surprisingly, Cheltenham. Although I suspect that's largely due to the incredible amount of roadworks they seem to have going on there at the moment. Whether London really is the most congested city is a bit of a moot point. TomTom certainly disagreed, at least back in 2019. They compared travel times during traffic-free conditions with delays during congested periods, and they gave a very different picture of congestion. The worst congested city, according to TomTom, was Manila in the Philippines, with Bangalore in India in second place. Interestingly, New York then falls outside the top 50 to 52nd. London was ranked only 45th, and Brussels, Rome, and Paris all were above London in the charts. And somewhat to my surprise, Dublin was much, much worse, ranking in 17th worst place. So depending on how you look at traffic congestion, you get two completely different views. Right, don't forget, set a reminder to watch Elevenses, catch up with the latest news and views on Wednesdays and Sundays for 11. You can watch it here on Facebook, or you can catch up with the show. It's normally up about an hour after it goes out live over on YouTube on my Survival Skills UK channel. But do not forget that all important UK on the end, or you'll be watching somebody telling you how to survive by eating ants or something similar. I'm sure they're very wholesome, but doesn't appeal to me in the least. In other news, the Motorcycle Action Group's Director of Campaigns and Political Engagement, Colin Brown, will be meeting the Minister for with responsibility for transport decarbonisation. Like me, you probably didn't know there was one, but it is one, Trudy Harrison, and they'll be having their meeting on the 15th of December, just a few days away. In the meeting, Mag will say that surveys in the UK and in Europe both show that the majority of motorcyclists oppose the proposed phase out of internal combustion engined motorcycles, and that they're committed to honestly representing the views of their members. Trudy Harrison, the MP for Copeland since 2017, said in a debate back in October that her father bought her a moped when she was 16. She said, "Dad took me to the garage and unveiled my first motorbike, as I thought, though it was probably a moped, a 50cc bright blue Honda Camino. I have had many enjoyable days out riding pillion on bikes, from a Honda CB900 Fireblade through to my dad's last bike, which was a Yamaha FZR 1000. So Collins says, given the minister's recent comments about being an advocate for motorcycling in the department, we're really encouraged that the appointment of Trudy Harrison is indicating a more proactive attitude towards motorcycling. It's vital that we speak to ministers as well as officials, and I believe we can now shape a fantastic new narrative for the future of motorcycling in the UK." Well, I'd like to hope so. Mag have also been invited to what they call a bilateral stakeholder meeting with the Department for Transport officials on December the 8th. Colin commented on that meeting, "It's been very tough to gain a meaningful discussion with officials until now. I believe this is largely due to the focus of the department on four-wheeled vehicles." Well, it would also be on cycles as well, as we've just seen. "This has been disappointing," he continues, "and riders certainly feel that their voice has not been heard, so the potential for a better dialogue is all important here. This is a vast and complex debate, and clearly one that should not be held without riders present." Well, I tend to agree with him there. Okay. Talking of petrol engine motorcycles, for years, one of Aprilia's most popular bikes was the Pegoso 650. The Rotax engined bike ran from 1992 to 2005. After that, it was fitted with a brand new Italian-built Minarelli engine. It was a Yamaha, basically. The model finally died a death in 2011, and since then, Aprilia really have been pretty much split between small scooters and big sports bike, with nothing much in the middle to attract riders looking for a sort of middleweight bike. There was the XV 450 and 550 engines, and but they found their way into a pretty pricey off-road bike or a supermoto. They weren't really road bikes. So in a way, it's actually quite a surprise that it's taken the Italian manufacturers long to come up with a new range of mid-sized engines. And they are wrapping a series of different bikes around their 660 twin. It first appeared in the RS 660 sports bike, you may recall, from a year or so back, then the Naked Tuono 660, and the latest offering is now the Tuareg 660 adventure bike. So there's a picture pinched off the front of Aprilia's website to give you an idea of what the bike looks like. It's said to be a true off-road capable machine, which raises the bar for off-road adventure bike riding, whilst also offering impeccable performance on asphalt. And it's all forged in the search for a perfect balance between form and technological and functional features. Yeah, okay, right. So that's the marketing blurb. But hyperbole apart, what's the bike aimed at? Well, it's kind of a baby Africa twin, I guess. And that's a niche that Honda themselves have said it to be readying themselves to enter. Now, when adventure bikes actually pump out triple digit powers. They have seat heights, some are up in the stratosphere needing oxygen, and they tip the weights with the sort of mass that only the Incredible Hulk would feel comfortable lifting. The Aprilia actually does represent a return to what I would consider to be motorcycling sanity. It's a quest to take away what's needed rather than find excuses to add things. Aprilia do say that part of the overall design process was the elimination of any part that did not have a specific function. For example, they say the entire top fairing is transparent plastic technopolymer. I think most of us would call that the screen, but anyway, hey ho. There are apparently no separate brackets for it. It is supported by the back of the instrument cluster, so they've done away with a structure to support the screen. What else do we know about the bike? Well, the engine configuration is the twin cylinder, which is relatively compact, and what that means is the subframe behind the engine can be lowered around the saddle area, and that makes for what they say is a modest seat height and making it easy for riders to reach the ground, while still maintaining plenty of rear-wheel travel for off-road use. There are a few other clever design features that I've noted when I was reading about the bike. For example, the panels on the side of the bike are removed when you come to mount the optional side panniers, which can therefore be tucked in nice and tight. The bike gets a sort of fairly perky 58.8 kilowatt, which is 80 horsepower, twin cylinder motor. The weight's fairly low, 187 kilos dry, so add 17 kilos or so for fluids. You get 18 litres of fuel, by the way, and that gives you a ready to ride rate of 204 kilograms, about 450 pounds. So it's light, if not featherweight. Given the worries about E10 petrol, though, one has to say that the few grams that they've shaved off that by using a plastic filler cap may be a step too far for many riders. Anyway, hey ho. What else do we know about the bike? Well, the engine is effectively the front two cylinders off the 1100 RSV4 Sportsback engine. The 81mm bore stays the same, but it gets a lengthened 63.93 millimeter stroke. The Tuareg shrinks the RS's 99 horsepower to 79 horsepower. It comes in slightly lower, 9,250 RPMs against 10,500. So it's still quite a revvy engine. An A2 license version with the 35 kilowatt, 47 horsepower is also likely. To give the engine a bit more response at low revs, it's got a changed valve lift, it has revised intake system with longer ducts, and it has a new exhaust system which apparently boosts low and mid-range torque. Peak torque is actually 51 foot-pounds or pound-feet, which is fairly chunky. That comes in at 6,500, and that is 2,000 RPM lower than on the RS650. And they do say that 75% of the peak is claimed to be ready to go from 3,000 and 9,000 from 5,500 RPM. That actually sounds not dissimilar to my very flat torque curve on my XJ600, which is a doddle to ride for that very reason. It neatly illustrates why, in fact, you don't need hugely powered motorcycles. Low-powered motorcycles can make up for a lack of horsepower simply by having available torque across a broad spread of rev range and being geared to use that that torque at real road speeds to exploit it when you actually twist the throttle. It's getting that instant throttle response that really matters. It's no good having bucket loads of torque or huge horsepower from a huge engine if you're not actually revving that engine hard enough to get near the peak. The engine comes with clutch assist, or the bike does. You get an optional up-down quick shifter, switchable ABS. Brembo gives you the front and rear brakes. 2 riding modes for street riding, one specifically for off-road riding, and a custom mode. You get the now obligatory 5-inch color digital TFT display. As a twilight sensor to adjust the brightness of the display, and lights a full LED. The frame is steel, which will partly account for the weight, I guess. Rather surprisingly, for a bike which has sort of competition, sort of rally raid looks, the rear subframe is welded up, which really suggests it's actually designed for road riding. K-arbor forks are fully adjustable up front, aluminium swing arm under a K-arbor shock, with full rebound and compression damping. Scorpion Rally tyres from Pirelli are wrapped around a 21-inch, 18-inch wheel combo. They're tubeless rims, by the way, which is a trend we're starting to see more and more of, which I think is a really good one. It's a bit pricey, 10,600 for the base model. If you want the Interco Tagelmust color, God knows what shade that is, blue possibly, it's an extra £500, but that will set you back basically rather more, well, £1,500 for that extra color scheme over the Tenere 700, which is 9,500 for a 2021 model. And that puts it basically straight into the ballpark for the Tiger 900, which also is 11,500, or the 890 KTM Adventure, which again starts at just under £11,000. For all the great reviews of the 700 Tenere, I've only ever seen a couple of them on the road. So my guess is that the Aprilia is likely to be even more of a niche seller. I suspect it's just too off-road oriented for most. So my guess is we may see one more bike actually based on this motor, something of a more road-oriented, touring-based adventure bike, something to compete with Yamaha's Tracer range would be my tip. Anything else to say? Well, personally, my worry would be reliability and backup. There've been plenty of reports, unfortunately, of the RS660 sports bike disgracing itself. So even with the 2-year warranty, I'd be rather concerned. I really wouldn't want to buy a new bike and have it off the road for half the warranty while it's being fixed after an engine blow up. The significantly reduced power output from nigh on 100 to 80 odd horsepower could work in the Tuareg's favour, though, but I certainly won't be taking a punt on one of them. Okay, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, you can come over to my survival skills page on coffee and buy me a coffee over there, support me over there, and you will also get access to all my hundreds of better biking tips. I've just put a couple more up this morning as it happens. I'm working my way through 2019 at the moment. So after 2019, only 2020 to go. And that means there'll be tips from 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. And as I said, I'm just completing 2019. So literally hundreds of better biking tips for you to read over there, and for as little as the price for coffee. Right, okay. Nick has also looked in and said good morning. Hello, Nick. Good to see you. Okay, so November's sales figures are out, and they continue to chart the rise of two unlikely brands, Royal Enfield and V-Moto. Now, they really couldn't be more different from each other. Or from the high-tech Aprilia that we've just been looking at, actually, as it happens. The Indian company that bought the Royal Enfield production line in the mid-1950s survived for many years by churning out those 50s British bikes before going a little bit more upmarket in recent years. And the Australian-based V-Moto business has actually made a success from selling inexpensive electric PTWs, which are manufactured in China, and currently they sell across 29 different countries. So let's have a look at where they all sit in the top 10. Let's get the picture up on screen. There it is. So you can see the major brands at this moment. Not too surprisingly, Honda are at the top of the tree. Yamaha are behind them. Lexmoto, the budget bike manufacturer, are in third place. Then Triumph, and just 2 bikes behind Triumph is Royal Enfield. And you'll notice that they're ahead of KTM, BMW, Kawasaki, and the scooter giant Piaggio. And then V-Moto down there in 10th place. Suzuki don't even make it into the top 10. Royal Enfield have actually achieved this result, of course, with a strictly limited range of models that goes from the classic 350 up through the 400 Himalayan to the new 650 Twins. V-Moto, who sell the Super Soco brand, have snuck into 10th place there through their range of about a dozen different lightweight motorcycles and scooters. So why are they there? Well, they're not particularly expensive. People have this idea that electric motorcycles are pricey. We'll go and check out the Super Soco range. It really isn't that pricey. And they then cost peanuts to run, and they do the job they're designed to do, which is moving one person short distances on busy streets. Let's have a look at the best seller chart as well, to see who's registering what models. So you can see that the Super Soco CPX is actually selling well in the small capacities bikes. And the Royal Enfield Meteor 350 has sold a fairly astonishing 284, dwarfing sales of the BMW 1250, which is often one of the best-selling bikes. So that brings me fairly neatly to today's discussion point, which is to do with those sales. I think they're both quite remarkable success stories. Now, who'd heard of Super Soco before lockdown? I hadn't. If you've been following the sales figures, you're probably surprised to see their 10th best-selling brand. That means they pushed Suzuki out of the top 10, not to mention Aprilia, as I've just mentioned. BMW are now outsold by Royal Enfield, at least they were last month. And the word is that some insiders in the bike industry are genuinely shocked by the success of Royal Enfield. So the Meteor, I've got a photograph of it somewhere, but it seems to have gone out of order. Here it is. Why is the Meteor selling so well? Well, it's old school styling with a new engine, brand newly designed engine. Um, but if there's one thing you get with a bike like that, it's actually functional. The only thing on the bike really that's vaguely high tech, apart from the new LED lights, of course, is that you get what they call a tripper pod on dash. Now, this is a very simple turn by turn navigator system that links to Google Maps turn by turn directions and basically just allows you to find your way around with no big effort on your part. If you want to find out a little bit more about it, there is a video online. It's not the best video I've ever watched, but if you sort of skip through it or speed it up or something, you can make your way through. I'll just put the links up. But what you don't get on the Meteor are loads of functions, and the same goes for their other product. This is the 650 Twin. This is the Interceptor. Whilst I was musing on all this the other day when I was putting this story together, I actually happened to find a review on the Carol Nash Insurance website. Won't give you the link for that. You can find it fairly easily. But one of the paragraphs that really jumped out at me was that the reviewer said, "This is a simple machine, and for many, that's a massive part of the appeal. The basic switchgear is a throwback to 20 years ago, and there are no riding modes or even traction control. There's no TFT dash, not even an LCD one. You've got two traditional chrome clocks with a small LCD inset that covers a fuel gauge, which wasn't very accurate, he goes on to say, and an odometer with two trips. That's it. It doesn't even tell you which of the six gears you're currently in." And I think that's some of the appeal of that bike. Now, back in 2019, I actually put quite a lot of miles, 3,500, 500 kilometers on a brand new Tracer 900. Now, in terms of riding the bike, I actually really gelled with it. But did it help me navigate from Auckland to Invercargill and back again? No, I had to bring my own GPS and my own handlebar mount, plus a couple of cable ties to fit the thing to the bars. Um, and it had riding modes and traction control was switchable, and the ABS. Did I do anything with it? Well, basically, no. I stuck it in the standard modes and I left it there for the rest of the trip. Frankly, the fun of fiddling with those buttons actually wears off after about 30 seconds. The only useful function on the LCD display was actually dual trip meter, because one could tell me my hour accumulated mileage for the entire trip, which was fun to watch. The other was useful because it told me how far I'd gone since the last fill up, and that gave me a good idea of how much fuel was left in the tank. Rather better, in fact, than the digital fuel gauge, which turned out to be worse than useless. It showed full when the tank was actually half empty, and then plummeted from two-thirds full to almost empty in 50 miles, which really isn't great for trying to plan fuel stops in a country where towns are more than 50 miles apart on South Island. Something else the bike comes with is a sort of a really sharp styled rear end. You'll see what I mean when I show you a picture of it. There it is. Now, unfortunately, we were pressed for carrying space on that bike. We were two up with all the luggage that we needed. And unfortunately, as you can see, the bike doesn't come with a rack, even though it's a sort of an adventure sport. And there happened to be none available in the whole of New Zealand when we set off. So everything we had to carry had to go in the two factory panniers, which were nice fit, to be fair. They come with integrated mounts, so they're really easy to clip on. But we also had to have a rolled up bag strapped behind the passenger. But what you'll notice is that there's no sort of real tail hump or anything, and certainly no rack to actually stick the bag on. It was a job to actually secure the bag, and perhaps not too surprisingly, at one point the bag actually fell off the back of the bike and dragged along the road for 50 meters before I could come to a safe stop. Unfortunately, the only casualty apart from the shredded bag was my also shredded unlined waterproof jacket, but as it was a cheapie, it was irritating, but not to the end of the world. But with no grab rail behind the passenger, there's nothing to use as a strapping point. And frankly, those sharp looking handles are what they are. They're sharp looking. They're actually not very functional because they're down beside the passenger's hip. They're difficult to actually use to stop yourself actually rocking forward or rocking backwards, depending on which way the rider is twisting the throttle. A grab rail actually behind you is a lot easier to use, and they're not even very good at being used as a grab rail when you're trying to lift the bike on to the center stand. So form very much over function in terms of the grab handles there. And something else about that bike, the further we rode, the more the suspension bedded in and softened up, just as you would expect with a new motorcycle. No problem with that at all. It's exactly what I would expect to happen. But I thought I will simply up the preload on the rear shock to cope with the weight as it started to sag a little. Guess what? I couldn't do that job with the toolkit. It's a simple, straightforward tweak of the ring on the bottom of the shock, but the toolkit didn't fit in the available space. I simply couldn't do it. So as well as dragging the roll-up bag down the road, I ended up dragging the foot pegs around corners fairly regularly, and even once or twice, rather more worryingly, I touched the centre stand down when there was a bump mid-corner. So that's the difference really between function and functional. The rear shock had the function, it was certainly adjustable, but it simply wasn't functional. I couldn't make that adjustment when I needed to, and I was reminded of that when this ad popped into my feed. It's from Pyramid Plastics, and they were telling me that they have just introduced a comprehensive winter protection kit for the Tracer 9 Tracer GT. So there it is. It's designed, it says, to protect both rider and machine from the onslaught of UK road muck, making winter riding a much more pleasant experience, as well as reducing the inevitable cleaning process. And they go on to tell you that it consists of a fender extender extra on the front, mudguard, leg deflectors, which guide the air away from the pillion pegs by the look of it. There is a radiator guard, a shock shield, headlight guards, a hugger extension, and TFT peaks. Now, some of that is bolt-on bling. I had to look up what TFT peak is. Makes no meaning to me, but it turns out to be a kind of sunshade that sits atop the LCD displays, presumably to make them easier to read, but that would only work with a vertical sun, so I'm not sure why it's in the winter kit. Anyway, it's 40 quid for a bit of 3D printing. The wind deflectors on the fairing, they are simply bits of see-through polycarbonate. A bit more practical, there are bits of plastic which go behind the pillion pegs, presumably to protect the rider from spray off the rear wheel. And you get a rear hugger, which another £33. I'm not sure what the radiator guard does. That's another 50. I suppose it might deflect the odd rock, but it certainly won't stop mud getting thrown into the radiator. And the headlight guards are £35 for something which I have to say is completely pointless. Anyway, I can't find a price for a whole kit. Doesn't actually say anywhere on the website that I can find, but given that the individual parts are somewhere around £300, I can't see you'll be saving a great deal on that. But whether or not it's a good idea to put a silly piece of black plastic with holes in it over your headlight and make it more difficult to see in the middle of the winter, the bigger question is, why should we actually have to be thinking about putting things like this on our bike? Why is it that modern motorcycles are actually so compromised in the practical riding department that we actually need to keep the muck off our bikes or we need bits of extra bolt-on tat to do the job? So maybe that is why bikes like the Royal Enfields are actually selling well. It's not just perhaps the bargain price. £4,000 gets you the new 350 Meteor. If you spend 6,000, you can get a brand new 650 Interceptor, which I have to say is a hugely attractive price. £2,000 less than the entry twin from Triumph, incidentally, which is no longer made in the UK but imported from Indonesia, of course. So maybe it's a sizable proportion of the riding population is actually realizing that modern Japanese motorcycles are actually prioritizing style over substance. Same goes for European bikes too, in my opinion. Padding the bike out with electronic fripperies, which contribute to the annual price hike, doesn't really make for a bike that's any more satisfying to ride when you're simply crunching miles and getting from A to B, in my opinion. I'll be more than happy to hear what you have to say about whether or not you need all the electronic doodahs that you're finding on modern bikes, and whether the styling is compromising their function as vehicles to get you from A to B. So do let me know what you think. I'll be more than happy to hear, as I say. That's it for today's show. I'll just wind down with a couple of reminders. Don't forget the gift vouchers. If you missed the beginning of the show, the link is in the comment stream, but you can head over to my shop and you can buy gift vouchers there, which will give you a saving on training for next year. The next showing of Science of Being Seen will be on Wednesday, the 2nd of February. I'll be doing something a little bit different. I'll give you some more information on that in due course. But before that, the next webcast will go out live on Wednesday, the 5th of January. These are always the first Wednesday in the month. You can book a ticket at this site here. It's on the topic of filtering, and I'll be asking, is filtering an art or a science? Does it need balls or does it need brains? Okay, I'll do that from my perspective as a 16-year-old, I'm a bit older than that, sadly, courier veteran. So do pop over there and see what you think in the new year. So one final comment from Nick, who says bolt-on tat is a common discussion point on GS forums, Chinese or Wunderlich. Yes, good question. All right, okay, so thank you all for looking in. Take it easy out there. Next show will be on Sunday at 11. Hope to see you then, but for now, it's been good to see you here, and be safe out there and stay shiny side up.